Well, then I will pass it on to Bob. Thank you for coming tonight, Bob. We really appreciate it, especially since last month was a little bit of a disaster.
Yeah, I'm afraid that was true. And we're in the midst of a larger disaster, and of course, I don't want to catch anything from all of you, so you can see I've got my mask on. I forgot, this is electronic, isn't it? So the only viruses I can catch are electronic viruses. Okay. Well, what I will be talking on is Bash command line editing, and we started this, of course, last month. We will try it again, see how things go. Okay. And let me know when people can see the site. You should see GNU Bash near the top and command line editing in green near the bottom.
Looks great. I can see all that.
Okay. Well, I am Dr. Robert Meier, and this is on November 10th, 19, right, 2020, for the South Carolina Linux Users Group. And Greenville, what is the sister group? Or
Well, we've
big
got
sister group,
Upstate
I
and we've got
guess?
Columbia.
Columbia. Okay, Columbia. Okay, so why would you, well, by a show of hands, how many people currently use command line editing? And I have to actually see the hands. Doesn't look like I'm seeing any hands. No hand. Okay, I guess nobody uses it. Well, in that case, why would you want to use it? Well, the Unix shell language is very flexible and very powerful. Because it is flexible, it's easy to make typos. So it saves you a lot of time if when an error occurs, you only have to fix what's broken and not retype the whole command line. If anybody's ever put an accidental space in or left one out, you know it can be very error prone if you've got a long command trying to type it with all the right spacing. Okay, and of course, if you once you get one thing right, you can repeat it. That's one of the big utilities, of course, of using the computer, a computer, is that it makes repetition very, very easy. And so, if you're careful to make sure you only repeat things that are right, um, you save a lot of time. Okay, now what we'll actually be talking about today is all in the Bash reference manual, and in fact, it's well enough ordered that that's the way the presentation is going to flow. Now, the Bash reference manual is not the same as the man page for Bash, but it is actually an ancillary and appendix to what used to be the BSD Unix documents. I will point out where the location is, but basically it's go to the GNU website or just do a Google for Bash reference manual, those three words, and you should find a pointer to it at the very top. And you'll know you'll be on the right side, of course, if you see the Bash logo, the GNU logo, the GNU. Okay, so what we'll be doing today is, if you're not already familiar with it, pointing out where in the Bash manual you can find the command line editing features, which you probably won't remember all of them, but if you remember where they are when you have a need for them, you can look them up very easily. It's Chapter 8 of the Bash reference manual. Okay, well, the basics. Anytime you're doing command line editing in any situation, you generally need to be able to move a cursor across the line. How many people here, again by show of hands, have ever used a typewriter? Looks like two people, three, four, five. Ah, good. At least several people here have used a typewriter. Okay. Well, on the typewriter, of course, you normally had both a backspace key, a space key to go forward, a backspace key to go back, and a lot of better typewriters had the ability to release the patent and simply move the head back and forth by hand over large distances for correction or for insertion or for whatever. Well, you need the similar feature in any type of command line editor, and Bash has those in two forms, for Emacs users and for VI users. Again, by show of hands, how many people here have used Emacs? Okay, one, two, two. Okay, and three, including me. All right. Well, Emacs is actually the default for Bash command line editing and has been since its inception. But it has also had VI for a very long time. So if you like VI, use set -o VI. Just type that in as you would any other command that you wish to execute. And it won't actually run a command called set. It will, in fact, be picked up as what's called a built-in by Bash. Set the options to VI, and then your keystrokes will be interpreted in a way that should be familiar to VI users. Similar for Emacs users, although the Emacs character set is fixed. You can't change the key binding like you could in Emacs, and the commands are the Lisp functions are extremely limited. But it has the default key bindings. For Emacs users, B for back to go left, F for forward to go forward, H backspace. If you're familiar with the ASCII code, American Standard character code for information interchange, then you'd know that Control H, 08, is the backspace. Control D for delete, which is deleting in the forward direction. A to go to the beginning of the line, and E to go to the end of the line. They presumably didn't use B for the same reason that they didn't use CC for copy and create and copy, and instead switched to DD, moved a letter off because CC was already the C compiler. Okay, for VI, H, L, Control H, Control D, I understand those are the same. 0 and $sign. Okay, now be aware that Bash is operating strictly in character device mode. So and it assumes that you're using a VT220 terminal or emulator, that being the Xterm default. So if you have a different keyboard, you may find the characters not always doing what you immediately expect. If, on the other hand, however, does everybody, or is there anybody who doesn't know that what term caps and how to change them are? Again, by show of hands, anybody want an explanation in case they don't have a VT220 emulating keyboard? Okay, no hands, so I'm assuming everybody's familiar with that. If not, that can be another talk. But for you, these days, most people are using an Xterm, so that's not a serious issue these days. Okay. And I have you'll notice I have the sections of these in the manual up ahead. That sounds like a question. Is somebody asking a question? Nope. Okay.
Well, I was just about to mention, Bob, that in VI mode, it's VI is insert mode by default. So if you want to go into edit mode, you have to hit escape. Just just as a point of, if anyone sets -L VI, just be aware of that.
Thanks. Good reminder. Very good reminder. Okay. Um, okay. You can tell I'm more. I have used VI, I have used Vim, and one day I figure Vim will catch up to Emacs. It's right now closing on Emacs rapidly as more and more macros get written for it. Um, the Okay, so and you'll also notice up at the top here, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but where it says movement, those section numbers, 8.2.2 in this case, correspond to the section numbers in the reference manual. So you can find these later, and it's well indexed with good explanation behind these. Manual is written very well. Okay, likewise, there's before word, in other words, moving the cursor back to the beginning of the word, after the word, to end and to beginning. And VI, because it distinguishes actually between end of word and beginning of next word in ways that Emacs does not normally, there are the two extra characters, E and W, that were added for VI users. Okay. Kill or cut and paste, kill and yank. VI came along in the 90s, I believe, and well, the 80s, I think, and used cut and paste. Since the generation that was going to college at that time had grown up in the grade school with cutting things out of paper and pasting them together with glue. Emacs started in the 70s with kids in college who had grown up with Superman and on the TV and familiarity with the terms of linotype technology. So they would remember Ed White yelling, "Kill the story," or yank, meaning to pull the thread around the typeset and start running the presses. So Emacs uses Control K for kill, which is the equivalent of cut, almost the equivalent, and VI uses D, D2 whatever, indicating where to stop. Emacs has the meta D, meta del for the next word, the last word, whereas VI uses the D and the second letter to indicate which direction and how far. And then yank for the equivalent of paste. Okay. Here. And feel free to interrupt at any time if there's questions. I'm going through this quickly because I assume it's fairly simple. Go ahead, question.
Just a statement. Both were invented in 1976.
Oh, okay, that's surprising. I thought VI followed, but in any event, out of curiosity, when did Vim start? When was the macros added to VI?
Yeah, Vim was much later. It was in the 80s or 90s. It was created on the Amiga.
Okay. Yeah, and Emacs started with macros. Emacs was the Rand E editor, Rand being a computer company of the 1960s, and with macros was E like base VI is very, very, very limited. But when you add the macros, it expands its capabilities tremendously. When I got my first Linux Slackware, it came on 5 disks and Emacs came on 6. Okay, so repeat. All right. Um, you can in Emacs normally you use a control U for there's a change. Use a control U for indicating replication by factors of 4. However, because control U is typically the character meaning to erase the command line, uh, it's I think one of the related to one of the ASCII codes. But anyway, historically, it's used to erase the line. So Bash instead uses the meta key, the alternate, to indicate the repetition. VI uses the same count of 10. Okay, and both have, of course, an undo. Now, you don't have the full undo history in either Emacs or VI mode. It's just one command. Okay, so now, when you get something right, do it again. And so there is a search history to find things. For VI, it's command line, it's only one row across, but K will get you to previous command lines. J, of course, goes down. Same corresponding thing for Emacs. All right. Okay, you can also search for strings backward in Emacs. You don't have a forward search in Emacs. You do have in VI. And note, by the way, that for VI users, the virtual direction is such that the previous command, when you do a search, you actually use the forward search, the forward slash, to search for prior commands with VI and use the question mark to search for following. I don't know why that was done, but that and you have a repeat of the single last search available. Okay. So let's see. If I'm going too fast for anybody, let me know. Okay, now you can customize the Bash command line editor, and I won't go into much of the details on that. But there's a .input RC file described in great detail in that 831 that allows you to set variables. And this can allow you to, for one thing, if you don't like Emacs being the default, you can set the default to VI. So that on your when you use Bash, the command line editor allows you to use VI commands, and you would have to use a set -O in order to switch away from that. Okay. You can also choose a way to mark lines that have been changed after they were executed. And I personally find this a useful convenience. Blinking matching parentheses is somewhat useful, although I have found that that conflicts with the color matching that's commonly used for LS and other tools. So you may want to, if you're used to using color with color features of others' commands, you may not want to use the matching paren or the colored stats, as it can get confused. Both Bash and the other application can get confused. Okay, so I said I won't go into most of these, but you can, here I have at least the ones I've mentioned, set mark modified lines, and that'll put a star in your history, an asterisk, when you change, go back with Control R or question mark and modify, edit, a prior line before executing it again. Now, one way I find this particularly works out well is if I've made a mistake and I corrected it, the line with the error in it will have an asterisk. The line that is correct and I repeat multiple times won't. And so it makes a very easy way to quickly, visually, identify which is the corrected line, especially if you're like me and going back with quick key presses. Okay. Blink matching parentheses, colored stats, and you can set a forward search history in VI. Since you have Control R and all the regular expression, all the incremental searching available, the Control O is more useful, I believe, for VI users. Can anybody tell me how Control O already works in VI? Nope. Okay. Okay, you also have conditionals that you can put into the input. So, for instance, as stated here, whether it's on Emacs, if it turns out that the key map for your terminal is not that of a VT220, I haven't tried this, but you, in theory at least, could actually change the key bindings to what makes sense for you on that terminal type. Also, we'll be going into later how there are features of Bash that include parameter completion, parameter expansion, and others that are application dependent, such as if you're going to, they principally use magic numbers, if anybody knows what those are. We'll get into that later. But for instance, if you are going to be playing something with mPlayer, for instance, you can Bash will expand, making it harder to make typos, available choices that it recognizes as being MPEG files. Now, mPlayer is one that when you install the normal mPlayer packages, it already makes that adjustment for you in Bash, system-wide. But you can make, if you write your own application, you can write the modifications in input RC. We won't be getting into that tonight unless somebody asks. To, in fact, tell Bash how to recognize files that your application accepts and what to do with them. Okay. So a lot of power in input RC, more than we could cover in an hour, more than we could cover probably in about 5 hours. Okay, input RC and the command line itself does have commands, and I won't be going into them directly, but for moving, for history, the basic one for history is history, History. Commands for killing numeric arguments. So you've got quite a few commands that you can put into the input RC and use within conditionals or within the application-specific modifiers. Okay. Okay, for completion, and here I'm going to try to bring up a console and see if it will let me switch to that. In fact, I'm going to do this, I'm going to bring up 2 of these. Okay, and now let's see if I can successfully Okay. Now can everybody see these two consoles?
I can.
Okay. One of them I'm going to go into VI mode. The other one I'll leave as Emacs mode. And so let's type in something. Oh, and you'll notice I'm using the backspace to edit the line since I missed an HE. Okay, and I'll copy that to the other one. Escape to go into insert mode. 0 to go to the beginning. And, oops, use Control C, which is the console copy here. So let's do that again. That should copy. Nope. Do it the hard way for now. Okay. Now let's correct both of these. Okay, left arrow gets me up, and also H should get me up, or K rather. Interesting, for some reason it's not using that line. All demos, of course, work. Everybody's familiar with that, right?
As do every month of the Linux users group.
That's right. Now, since I've typed this more than I intended to, you've probably guessed what I'm going to correct in this. So, what's the command to go back in VI, to go back a character? Everybody?
H.
Okay, there, whoops. Escape H. There we go. And now how about to correct this? What's the command?
Are you wanting to correct the entire word at a time, or you want to do it by character?
Well, let's do the entire word at a time since I don't know how to do that.
You could do a DB to delete one word back.
Okay, or CB.
Yep.
Let's do CB. Okay, it does that. And escape to get back out. Okay, 2 Emacs users. How do I, what's the best way to correct well, one, how do I go back? Okay, Control B, or left arrow, which works in both cases. And how would we fix this in Emacs? All right, Control T. Okay.